October 25th, 2019, part 2 of Scorpio, put on by myself at angelicmercy44@gmail.com, or you can check out my website, angelicmercy.com, where it provides a list of what to do, how the type of readings I give or healings that I teach about or give, and how you can contact me. Well, we started yesterday. In 2 days, we're having the new moon in Scorpio. Our sun is now in Scorpio. The day of the new moon, as we mentioned in yesterday's part 1, is going to be exactly opposite Uranus in Taurus, which is profoundly affecting all of us worldwide. And it's kind of, we've been in what you call the Mercury retrograde shadow for the last 9 or 10 days. And this shadow, which is kind of when Mercury slows down and is just sort of stationary before it turns retrograde, it's been harder and stronger and more intense than usual. And I think a lot of people have been experiencing some of the Mercury retrograde impositions during this period. And I think what we also need to be aware of is that we've had in the background lurking Mars square Saturn. Mars in Libra, about justice, about ego, about will, vacillation, what is right, what is wrong, what is the justice system? Is that structure going to be broken down? Is it crystallized? Is our legal system going to stand up to the scrutiny of what's going on right now? All of that. And we've headed into the last 6 to 7 weeks of Jupiter being in Sagittarius. So Jupiter is now moved into the 3rd decade of Jupiter. What that means is there are 10 degrees to each decade of Jupiter. The first one is a Jupiter-Jupiter. It's a Sagittarius sort of feeling. The second aspect of it is a Jupiter-Aries, moving forward, catalytic Jupiter energy. Hi, sweetie pie. It's okay, darling. Our cat was missing. She just came home. And the 3rd decade, which we're in now, is the Jupiter being affected by Leo. So all of a sudden the drama has heated up. Everybody's in their ego. There's a lot of pride and fighting, and things have just escalated. And I think we've all felt it worldwide. Not just in our country. Take a look in Chile at the riots. Take a look in Venezuela. Take a look at the United States with our impeachment. China with their situation with Hong Kong. The Canadian election, which Justin Trudeau was kind of brought down a big step. And a lot of people lost confidence in him, and he has to form a minority government. And then if you go down to Australia, you've got the extremist government, right-wing government there, people discontent with that, people upset with that. And if you go into Europe, there's all sorts of stuff going on in France and Germany, and most of all in Britain, where that's a real mess with Brexit. And it was not really expected that Brexit would be signed on the 31st with Mercury going retrograde. And so it looks like we're going to have another election in December. That's being considered. So everything is in a state of upheaval, and a lot of people are exhausted, disappointed, just had enough up to here, and they just want stability. So that's why when I get to the United States here, I'm going to talk about why I think Joe Biden has recently recovered. And I don't think it's just because of President Trump's method of trying to disgrace his son I think it's also people are tired and they want to just go lay their head on the shoulder of an old grandfather energy and someone they know and they feel safe with and kind of know the ropes of what he's going to do and not do. Not to say he ends up as the leader of the party, but at this time he's created a surge heading back to his former lead, and we'll just have to keep an eye on that. We'll talk about that in another video. It was easy to see last January when I wrote my column about the coming year. I did mention that I felt the biggest time Donald Trump would start to meet himself on the road and have some retribution would be the end of September, getting into October, November. So that seems all in line, and it's not my genius, it's the movement forward of Saturn and Pluto, and then the movement of Neptune was squaring Jupiter, so all the deceptions are starting to come to the surface in the third square of that. Pretty easy to see that with this Mars square Pluto and Saturn in Capricorn, that's what we're heading into now, as we have the Mercury retrograde, as we have the new moon on the 27th in 2 days, opposing Uranus. That's a big shift. And we should sit down on the new moon and write out our new moon ways of how we wish to reinvent ourselves, reinvent our life, and become more filled with the joy and expression of our true essence than to be caught up 100% with all of the drama and all of the exhaustion and all of the focus. Because what people don't realize is when they put this massive focus on Donald Trump, even if it's a negative focus, it is feeding him with energy. So we need to take our focus and put it on the candidate we love or the ideal that we follow and pour our energy into that. Not to say we can't chastise wrongdoings, but let's not expend all our energy on that, because he's a master at sucking all the air out of the room. We should all know that by now and wake up. So I'm going to now take the start with Libra. I've already done up to Virgo, how this new moon and how Mercury retrograde, because we're going to have the sun, moon, new moon in the chart of Libra or Libra rising. If you don't know your rising sign, Libra people. That new moon is going, and that Mercury retrograde is going to sit in your second house. And your second house and the Uranus is going to oppose it in the 8th house of Scorpio. So that for the Libran is going to be a lot of shakeup, a lot of movement. And the Libran has already been going through a lot because they've had these squares to Saturn and squares to Pluto that they've been dealing with that have been very disruptive and very exhausting, and forced the Libra rising to make changes in the personal self. Secondly, that new moon in Scorpio with the Mercury going retrograde on the 31st, being in the second house, there's going to be a deep reassessment of what your values are. What are your basic core values? What is your basic core day-to-day way of how you live your life? And what is your feeling, your security in this world? Because that's the house of Taurus. So how can you make yourself feel more secure? Where do you lack security physically in the physical world? And opposing the 8th house, there might be some feelings of reassessing losses that you've gone through in some way, either through having lost somebody that you love dearly, or loss of money or loss of a spouse through divorce, because Uranus being in that 8th house, it's shaking up your life, it's shaking up your internal life. So Librans, they often like to walk through life with a feeling of grace and poise and balance and everything's just fine. But with this new moon in Scorpio and the Mercury in Scorpio opposing the Taurus Uranus energy, it's tough. It's been tough on you guys, and you have to be willing to really own up to your own shadow, not projecting on anybody else, and take a good hard look at what are your values and what do you want to create in this life in the next stage. That Saturn and that Pluto have been riding through your 4th house. So that's been pretty hard on you as far as really hitting your inner security and your inner feelings about yourself and your subconscious, and it's been kind of eating at you a little bit. So you could use this Scorpio energy to really create a personal transformation through deep introspection. Okay, let's move on to Scorpio. And here we are, new moon in Scorpio for all the Scorpions, or for Scorpio rising. This is hitting you right head on in your house of personality. And the Mercury retrograde is in your house of personality, and Venus is in Scorpio in your 1st house. So you're going through a major personal change. You're going through a major I would almost say like a major makeover of yourself. And with the Uranus in your 7th house, you may have been forced to make some profound changes in the self through your partner, through the Taurus, because Scorpio rising, it goes through a lot of feelings of survival and struggle, and they're great survivors, and they're very brave people, and they're people that one day you could see them looking at the brink of death, and the next day see them dressed to the nines. I mean, they have tremendous restorative capabilities. But underneath it all, they're longing, their shadow self is being Taurus, they're longing for personal security, personal sense of security. And Uranus being in that house is kind of cracking open their relationships, their marriages, their closest people in their life, and making them look at their shadow self a bit. So you might find that you have to make some changes in your marriage or who you're with, or you could suddenly meet somebody out of the blue. Mercury retrograde in the 1st house, you could also have an old boyfriend show up or come back into your life, or feel I don't know, well, being a Scorpio, my feeling is always that it would be good to journal about how I see myself and to be more kind and loving to myself. The Scorpio can be very, very hard on themselves. Moving on to Sagittarius, you've got that new moon in your 12th house, hidden behind the scenes. Sagittarius rising, you've got Jupiter in full blaze in your 1st house, in the decant of Leo. So this is your time to really shine personally and to get a lot more attention, not intentionally just happening, because your aura and everything about you is bigger and brighter and lighter. The new moon in the 12th house opposing the 6th house Uranus is probably going to uncover or bring up some of your insecurities, your Achilles heels, your places where you feel, oh my God, I thought I put that to bed long ago, and now it's showing up again, and how do I deal with it? And I just feel undone. I don't know how to put myself back together. And yet the Jupiter was kind of this dance you have between this Jupiter going, I feel beautiful, fabulous, fantastic, full of life and light, and the behind the scenes Scorpio for getting until we get up into Sag, Sun, around the 22nd of November. Just this 1 month of deep introspection and reflection and trying to figure out, sweetie pie, it's okay, darling, everything's good. There's my kitty cat. She came home, so she's now wanting attention. Hi, sweetheart. Good girlie. So I would suggest that you would take this time to go into the more quiet parts of yourself, like when those insecure moments come up, to really spend some time alone, go into the nature, spend time near water, have a beautiful bath, nurture yourself, be sweet and kind to yourself, and spend some time with your Holy Spirit, with your inner being, to help expunge some of those old wounds. Moving up to Capricorn, there you are, Capricorn, with Saturn and Pluto grinding through that first house. So this is for Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You're looking hard at yourself. And it's like you have to remake yourself. You just had no choice. Pluto has just broken down all that you perceived yourself to be. And then Saturn came whacking in behind it, saying, why are you so rigid? Why are you so crystallized? Why are you stuck in this rut? You got to break open from that. You're starting a new 30-year cycle of your life. Saturn's been through your 12th house. You're into the first house. So you're redefining yourself. It's a beautiful time for new growth and a new you to emerge. The Scorpio is up in your 11th house of friendships, of humanitarian activities. So you may find that you want to reconsider how you could engage more in the world and create some humanitarian activities. With the retrograde Mercury up in that house, you may find that you have to go over with a friend, or some friends may come back into your life, but you also may find that there could be a miscommunication with a friend that you have to repair, heal, because Scorpio is a healer. And with all that Scorpio sitting up in that house, it would be very helpful to you to search out where your heart lies and find a group that you could join that would be aligned with your deepest loves, your deepest commitments. Because you're a wonderful sign of commitment to a cause and staying with it when you put your mind to something, not bailing. You're a very reliable person and very honorable in that regard. Moving on to Aquarius. So we got Aquarius in the first house, opposing Leo in the 7th. So the Aquarian has got all this new moon energy up in its house of career. If ever there were a time to remake your job, to remake your life, to remake how the world sees you, because the 10th house is about how the world sees you, not how you see yourself or your personal looks, but how does that world see you? What is your reputation? What face have you shown to the world? Are you living up to your true reputation, to the highest and best of who you could be, Aquarian? Because you are a mighty sign, you're a fixed sign, you're a sign of great ingenuity, you're the child of the future, you're an original thinker. Are you using all this in your life? Because the one thing about some Aquarius is that they need to kick themselves because they can be procrastinators. They can have all the greatest ideas in the world and not get to them. Just start them and set them aside, and unless you've got some other planets in your chart that strengthen that, But so I always advise Aquarians to look to your 10th house of Scorpio and your fact that you really are a mover and a shaker out there in the world and could create a lot of change. And that's why we see a lot of presidents that have strong Uranian energies in their chart or strong Aquarius in their chart, Aquarius rising, Aquarius sun, Aquarius moon. President Obama had Aquarius moon, President Reagan was Aquarius. I was talking about Elizabeth Warren's sun being a junk Uranus. I could go on and on and on. The Uranian factor in a lot of the charts of great leaders. So, and you've got that Saturn winding its way through your 12th house. So you've been looking at a lot of your inner sadness, your inner Achilles heels, and you've been kind of hard on yourself and feeling bad about yourself, or if you do something wrong, being way too hard on yourself. And so I would really encourage those when they have a Saturn transit of the 12th house, because what that feels like is you can't get your feet on the ground. It's like that feeling of pushing in a dream and you can't land. That's a feeling of Saturn in the 12th. So I would work on magical, mystical, sensitive parts of myself and encourage those parts, because then you will be assisted by Saturn to restructure that part of yourself. Moving to the very last sign, we're at Pisces. And the Pisces energies, we've had this Neptune transit through your first house. So you felt ultra Piscean for the Pisces rising and the Pisces sun. You've been so on Neptune, literally, that it's really important for you to ground yourself, to get more grounding in your life. And with this Scorpio up in your 9th house, the sun and moon sitting there on the 27th, the sun there for the rest of the month, Mercury retrograde, and Mercury in there for until December 10th. You have a lot of Scorpio assistance, because Scorpio trines your beautiful water sun. So this is a time for you that you could really engage in spiritual studies, in studies of the higher mind, in travel, in expanding who you are through visiting other parts of yourself, because you're a very multifaceted person. It's hard to define a Pisces. Their symbol is two fish, one going one way, one going the other. So they have kind of a dual quality to their nature. They can be very self-critical with that Virgo on their opposition house. And I would suggest that you indulge also and put your mind into creative ventures right now. I think it would be very positive for you. The Saturn square, the Mars in Libra is bringing the Libra into the 8th house and the Mars in the 10th house. There's been a lot going on beneath the surface with you. Maybe even lost a family member or somebody you love dearly, or gone through some kind of mystical experience with the other realms, with Mars in that house. There's a tremendous capability right now for you to really develop emotionally and to be a spiritual aspirant. That's where I would like to end with that, because I would like to briefly look at where this is taking place in the chart of the United States. And the place that it's taking place is, we're getting this new moon in, even though we're Sagittarius rising, the 12th house is a very small house, so we're getting the new moon in the 11th house of humanitarian activities and how the world sees us. So this is a time for us as a country to realign with all different nationalities, religions, races, belief systems, to stop being so damn rigid and to really understand Mercury retrograde in there, that we could be also experiencing some retribution for what we did in Syria, or our disgrace in front of the world. And this would be a time for us to speak up and to come out and to try to repair that in some way. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see over the next month reparations made or shifts in policy made to Syria, Turkey, and Russia, because the choice and the action was so profoundly erroneous and has caused so much suffering and pain and just so outrageous. So that new moon and Mercury in that house is going to be very powerful for us.